Part 2 takes place on an ultramarine recruiting world on the eastern fringe, just several thousand light years from a crag. At this point in the Shadow Crusade, resources are low and defenses have weakened over time due to the surrounding orcs in their system. One day a fleet appears in the sky and are found to be Imperial ships, a good sign for this world. Captain Kermitas of the Ultramarines meets Nakal, leader of this fleet, while the Ultramarines along with civilians celebrate their arrival below. Of course, as you'd expect, things didn't go the way Kermitas could have ever imagined and ends up with him being locked away, while the other captains are shot dead. Scene 2 was to involve a young boy playing outside. Then a rush of people run towards the White City where a parade is being held for the new arrivals. His grandfather is reluctant to let him go, at first, but promises to bring him after they've finished dinner. Later on, we witness the child on his grandfather's back, slowly trying to make their way towards the front of the crowd. The child asks why these Marines are red, and the grandfather could only speculate as to who they are, as they've never witnessed another legion. He overhears Ultramarines talking amongst themselves, saying that their word-bearer brothers have changed a lot, to which he tells his grandchild who they are. An explosion goes off behind them in a distance and the grandfather holds his grandchild's legs tightly, saying something is wrong. Scene cuts. A more simplified version of this city. This takes place just outside the capital, where we follow the character Samantha, keeper of the library of the White City. This library is also a fortress for civilians to take shelter in the event of an attack. Beneath the library itself is a network of tunnels which go many kilometers beneath the surface and connects to other safe zones and emergency world evacuation. Several other legionaries have been ordered to self-isolate due to their crimes committed on their last campaign, resulting in the deaths of fellow battle brothers. Captain Tatus Decimus has just arrived to speak with these recently censured battle brothers and talk about what happened and how their service is to be carried out from here on in. Samantha gets a call from home as she puts books away, but can't hear anything on the other end due to static. Meanwhile, the captain and the censured hear an incoming impact wave and immediately tell everyone in the library to take cover. As people come to in the library, Pythane and Academy forces bring the first batch of civilians to the shelter. Samantha, realizing the blast wave came from the direction of her house, thinks of her baby's safety and makes her way out of the library. Pythane tells her it's not safe and anything in that direction is hazardous. Meanwhile, Decimus makes his way out and rushes back to his gunship, allowing room for Samantha to slip past Pythane. Pythane calls to her and warns that if she is to do this, take the subway route since the main road systems are rigged to blow should anything happen. She nods and begins her journey home. As she runs down the stairs, she tries calling home and hopes she can contact the babysitter. When that failed, she tried calling her husband, but nothing is getting through. The streets below are backed up with vehicles and crowded with people trying to push their way in. Legionaries examine every person that goes by them, making sure nothing dangerous comes in. As she journeys forward, she realizes the frantic chaos unfolding on the streets. Hovercraft fly overhead as Academy Guard run past her. Titan forces are deployed. dawning the level of threat that has come to them. For a moment, she thinks it to be the orcs. The train conductor in front yells and warns her not to go into the station and that they are to seal off the building as soon as the last train arrives. Ignoring him, she runs through it. Back on the streets, Samantha sees a roadblock up ahead and is confronted by a legionary telling her to turn back. Frustrated, she begins arguing with him. They are cut off by another Marine telling the sergeant that he sees something in the smoke. Turning away from Samantha, the sergeant goes to look while Samantha tries to see what's going on, in hopes that she can see who it is exactly is attacking them. In the distance, they notice the cobalt blue of their kinsmen. The sergeant at the barricade is relieved and asks if they had seen anything on their way here. After a moment's pause, bolter fire erupts around Samantha and she sees all the legionaries around her have just been executed, with the sergeant being mortally wounded. The Ultramarines down the street remain silent and walk forward as if nothing happened, not even providing any aid. The sergeant looks at Samantha and tells her to run while the word-bearers who were accompanying the Ultramarines and backstab them converge onto him. Terrified and confused, she runs down the block, her house being around the corner and just down the street. It happened so fast, she still didn't understand who the enemy was. As Samantha catches her breath, she hears commotion rounding the corner. Abandoned vehicles litter the streets as screaming and laughing can be heard echoing off the surrounding buildings. Cautious, she ducks down behind the cars to avoid detection, trying to find out what's going on and to see if there was any way to get around whatever was making this noise. As she gets closer, she spots almost a dozen individuals armed with weapons, torturing civilians. They laughed as they committed these atrocities. They all wore the same robes worn by the so-called refugees that came with the word-bearer ships. What could have driven them to do this, she thought. In the distance, she spots a larger vehicle. The cultists afar are occupied and the one closest to her gets down on top of its victim and begins carving something into a man's face. With this, she makes a run for it. After crawling under the vehicle, Samantha lay still, hoping no one heard her. The cultist who was mutilating the man's face turns and walks over, thinking he saw something. Just before finding Samantha out, something down the road approaches. A speeder, accompanied by two Razorbacks, come down the road and spot the commotion. Turrets mounted above the Razorbacks begin firing at the cultists as legionaries and Academy Guard disembark. As this happens, Samantha takes this opportunity to run straight to her home and makes it through its doors safely. Little did she know that her troubles were just getting started. As she made her way up the building, she heard gunshots and people screaming behind every open and closed door she passed. Getting to her room was in all accounts a miracle had she known what exactly was happening in the building. She entered her apartment and called for the babysitter, but no one replied. Samantha ran to the bedroom and laying there was her son, Cestus. She grabbed her child and stood there, being in the moment, all sounds disappearing. Then suddenly, silence was broken as a loud bang was heard from her front door. Samantha ran further into the room and turned the table over her and her son. Suddenly, two cultists barged in and called out for the baby as they heard his cries just a moment ago. After stepping several feet in, something bright behind them appeared. A man sporting a hat and a bandana over his face walked through. He reached into his leather jacket and pulled out a digital weapon and fired a single shot, killing both cultists. Samantha peeked above the table and saw two men motionless on the floor. She saw this man looking around the hall and out the window, shook his head, and entered back into what seemed like a terror in reality. hearing someone above scream and stabbed with a massive blade, which entered the room through her ceiling, with blood dripping on the floor. She held her baby close and followed the man into the portal. Alright, that's part 1 of 2 for the entirety of the lore for Death of Hope. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I also want to give a shout out to the 330 patrons over the last 3 years for helping me get as far as I did with this project. As you guys know, I am the creator and artist for the entire project, and their support is the only reason I had the willpower to even touch part 2. These legends have helped with the costly monthly bills for the programs I use, as well as the technical upgrades for the computer. I also want to give a special thanks to all the voice actors and the musician who have helped bring my work to life. Hope you guys have a good Christmas. Had to cut it short just because of the holidays. Look forward to the next part, either end of this year or early next year. All right, there's a lot more to the story, so stay tuned. All right, take care.